Greetings from the tavern, everybody. Welcome to week 2 of the Hearthstone Grandmasters. We are in the Americas region as Asia Pacific and Europe finished off their kickoff for the second week. My name is Frodan. You can call me Frodan. And I'm joined by TJ Sanders. I was a little bit too amped up.
TJ Sanders.
And we had the pleasure of having another great week of matches. The first weekend full of warriors. This weekend, the story of the mages. However, we have seen a lot of variety being brought to the table here going into the second week. So let's go ahead and show you guys what we have in store for today. We're going to kick things off with justsaiyan, who was the America's point leader for 2018, playing the Paladin, which is the first time we'll be seeing that class make an appearance up against Purple from the Mage. Then we have Monsanto bringing Rogue after the Bounds patch, which says Nerfs, Preparation, Raiding Party, and Evil Miscreant, go up against Rase, another fearless Paladin player. Then for match number 3, we have our first Shaman of Hearthstone Grandmasters, Nalguidan from Argentina, going up against ETC from America.
Yeah, and then for the later portion of the day, we have Dog bringing a Warrior deck. Now, however, it does look quite a bit different than the Warrior decks we saw last week. Definitely teched for mages, so I'm honestly excited, even after all the worry we saw in week number 1, to see how it's going to shape up for Dog. But definitely excited for the matches today. We got the Paladin deck, which is kind of making a comeback. We saw Holy Wrath Paladin in previous metas be a very powerful deck, especially with Uther of the Ebon Blade as an additional OTK method. But now a little more straightforward, a little more one-dimensional. But speaking of that Paladin, we'd like to highlight Race's deck, who was one of the 3 players that brought the deck. And how it effectively works: Shirvallah the Tiger, a 25 cost card that gets cheaper for every mana you've spent on spells. Now with that, once you cycle through your deck, you can shuffle a Shirvallah back into your deck as your only card and deal 25 damage to your opponent with Holy Wrath. That's the main part of the deck. There are a little bit of nuance to it once you get to those later stages of the game, but pretty straightforward as a strategy goes nowadays in Hearthstone.
And then what becomes really powerful is the secondary and tertiary deck. You might expect, like, well, doesn't this deck just lose to a deck that can get a bunch of armor, like a warrior deck? The secondary deck with the Undertaker, as we saw at the World Championship with Roger's Paladin deck, has a lot of late game to be able to go over the top with 1 copy of Immortal Prelate and the Undertaker and things like Mechano Egg, Mechanical Whelp to give you more of those resurrect effects. And then tertiary deck, of course, to stop the aggro. Also, we want to feature the Shaman deck that fellow Latin American Nalguidan also has brought. Murloc Shaman is a deck that I saw Slissa was able to climb to rank 2 legend, where she made a 16-game winning streak. Had the pleasure of talking with her on Omnistone. Make sure to check that out. Murloc Shaman, a deck that I think people were maybe eyeballing prior to Rise of Shadows, and then when it released, fell a little bit to the wayside because of all the other decks that are coming out. Perhaps this is the time for this deck to shine.
Yeah, I've been playing a ton of this deck over the past week. Even before we saw deck submissions, I was honestly hoping that more players would bring it because it does really well against a lot of the slow decks. It has a ton of reload, especially when looking at that secondary deck to combat warriors. And I think its biggest strength is against Mage. It gets on the board fast, it piles on the aggression, and Toxfin, the 1-mana 1/2 Murloc that gives another Murloc poisonous, allows you to nearly always have an answer to those early mountain giants, sea giants, what have you, to be able to push through. So not only is it just very fast and can win games on turn 5 against Mage if they don't have an answer, it also can just fight for the board and have a ton of reload potential with Underbelly Anglers later on in the game. So really love the deck, and I'm glad at least we see 1 this weekend in Americas.
Yeah, I think that Shaman is very underrated as the class in general, largely because it gets outshined by pretty much almost every other deck that builds the board, like Token Druid, right? People are saying if you're going to build a board that's very aggressive that can utilize all these small, wide boards, you might as well have Savage Roar and all these big buffs with Power of the Wild, or even Zoo Warlock, right? Zoo Warlock making an appearance in Europe this weekend with Viper. But I think Shaman, people constantly underestimate, 1, the threat of Bloodlust, and 2, just how annoying the board refill can be when you're playing all these Murloc decks. You mentioned Underbelly Anger, love that card. And there's even like funny other like cameos too, some of the Murlocs that are powerful, like Scargill. That card I underestimate a lot And then all of a sudden when it gets played against me, I'm like, huh, this is really insane. We'll talk a little bit more about it. We're just getting started with the preview, but the players are set for our first match. So when we come back, we're going to prepare for the beginning match of Week 2, which is Just Saiyan versus Purple. Stay tuned.
One night, I was called on to scry. But what is this symbol I spy? It's my own crystal ball. Yes, I'll answer the call. And the others will come by and by. That's right. We be calling a team in. The masters of plotting and scheming. By this candle a-glowing, I surely be knowing whose gold will be once more a-gleaming.
My name is Christos Sakopoulos. My battle tag is Phenomeno21327. My username comes from when I was a kid. I used to go to like an internet cafe with my friends to play like, I remember WoW and stuff like that. And I just had to make a character one day, and one of my friends said, your plays are phenomenal, so you can just put the name Phenomeno there. And I just did it, and then it just stuck. The thing that's unique about my playstyle, I feel, is that I sometimes think about stupid plays that other people would never even consider, and I try to get something out of it. I think people don't pay attention to details like trading or going face. I really pay attention to those things because I think it's super important. Like even one bad trade can cost you the game a lot of times. My favorite memory was definitely when I won my first Hearthstone tournament last year in HCT Orange County. And doing that just gave me so much more confidence and made me feel like I was free again. I'd say being in Grandmasters means that I've made it to the top players of Europe, which has always been my goal. So yeah, I'm looking forward to start competing again.
Welcome back, everyone. As we get ready for our first match of Week 2, we have Just Saiyan from Radiance and the USA going up against Purple from Canada. Purple, a player who has been to multiple World Championships and just coming off of a top 8 performance in the 2019 Hearthstone World Championship in Taiwan. However, Purple has a win under his belt, and Saiyan does not. Saiyan's 0-2 in the overall standings. In fact, if you want to go a level deeper, TJ, Saiyan has yet to win a game in Hearthstone Grandmasters.
That's right.
However, last weekend was him bringing a warrior deck list that was unfavored against other warriors. Therefore, it felt like kind of natural or expected that he would falter here. This weekend, he decided to go more off the wall in terms of his preparation and brought a Holy Wrath Paladin, which is really cool because Muzzy didn't bring a Holy Wrath Paladin. They usually tend to be aligned on strategies.
Yeah, we saw Frozen and Rase are the two other players to bring the Holy Wrath Paladin. So very interesting choice. I do think it does really well against Mage just because of how much removal the deck has. With Equality, with Shrink Ray, you're able to just pick apart wide board states of the biggest minions possible very easily. Also, Timeout just can buy you some time. You can force your opponent to overextend on the board or force them to kind of have dead turns where they do nothing. Very interesting. Now, Just Saiyan going up against Purple's Mage list, he does have a Bloodcell Corsair, which pretty much useless in the matchup. It does get pulled from Crystology, and I understand where he's coming from with that. It's a cheap minion that can dump easy. It can help you get some of your spells cheaper with Prismatic Lens, I suppose. But other than that, it's just going to be something that he tries to play to maybe set up for equality or something along those lines. But a very straightforward deck.
Yep. In the meantime, purple bringing the Cyclone Mage. It is skyrocketing popularity. You guys saw it on full display in Europe and even Asia Pacific. And its win rate is still absurd. Its overall series win rate is just a cut under 75% in Grandmasters. Even when people are expecting it, it's still performing decently well with a above 50% win rate. And I think that's really important to note. When in a single deck or single class format in any card game, there's going to be a most popular deck, and that tends to be something that often compromises it, is win rate, because it's going up against itself a lot, but also people are targeting it. Therefore, even if, like in say week number 1, Warrior was the most popular class, however, people were bringing anti-Warrior tech sometimes as well and being the Warrior. And in last week's case, it was the Cyclone Mage. This week, despite the fact that Cyclone Mage is the most popular deck, it's still above a 50% win rate, which is starting to show you just how insane this deck and class can be.
Yeah, which means the players kind of have to go back to the drawing board and kind of come up with the next logical step. And I think this Holy Wrath Paladin is sort of a step in the right direction. I'm not 100% confident in it. Once I saw the list, I tried to jam as many games as I could. And I was having success against Mage, but it's not by any means a hard counter, I would say, because they can still do things that you just don't have the answers to if you don't find it early. And justsaiyan only has 1 copy of Equality in his list, which having repeated removal effects for those wide board states is pretty crucial. But as we get into this matchup, it's pretty straightforward for purple. It's just about finding a way to build a big board early. Now, purple, you can tell that he wasn't expecting Holy Wrath Paladin, because pretty much all of his techs in his main deck are for the mirror matchup. He's got double Snap Freeze, which is a way to easily deal with a big threat on his opposing side. His secondary deck looks like it's targeted at Warriors and Rogues, and his tertiary deck looks like it's targeted at aggro. So he doesn't have a list designed to beat this deck, which could be the downfall.
That's definitely one of the biggest pros to bringing this Holy Wrath Paladin. TJ, I'm going to take a little bit more of an extreme stance. I think that Holy Wrath Paladin is very favored against Mage. They can't heal above 30. They don't really have armor gain. And more importantly, they're a lot more honest with their damage when they don't directly put fireballs and frostbolts into their deck list. Instead, they have to hope that they get it off of a magic trick scenario or off of a mana cyclone, big swing turn. They don't do anything for like 4 or 5 turns now.
Yeah.
And also, Saiyan has that copy of Equality. You were mentioning that there's only 1 Equality, but a lot of the deck lists I saw on Ladder, they actually cut Equality because they were afraid of even more aggressive stuff
yeah, that's why the Bloodstone Corsair is there as well for Saiyan, because he expected that. And
like back then when Rogue had double waggle, you would have.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. I think it is a very good matchup, and I think it's made even better by the fact that purple has Frost Novas and Snap Freezes, which are basically going to be dead cards. On Ladder, it's a much different story. You run into more questing adventures, which you may be forced to use removal on early. You're faced with just more kind of big stuff. Astromancers thrown in, which can build a medium-sized board, which you don't want to use removal on, but sometimes they're forced to. Those types of situations. Against purple, I think he's... Okay, I think he's, yes, very favored.
Yeah, before this Sandbinder draw, I was very worried for purple because he just had a normal reactive mage hand. But now that he has his elemental, which is almost guaranteed to be drawn because he had the first mana cyclone in his hand, purple actually has multiple routes to potential victory. However, Saiyan already has that Pyromancer, that Shrink Ray. Shrink Ray has largely replaced a lot of the equalities in these controlled defensive paladins. And for good reason, obviously, because Equality costs 4, but Shrink Ray has the added benefit of just being played as a solo removal card, versus Equality is a combo card.
Yeah. Shrink Ray is not like a full removal, because let's say you Shrink Ray a board full of Mountain Giants, they can still Conjurer's Call and get the full value back. But, Dan, I will highlight a very interesting win condition for the Mage in this matchup.
Okay.
And that is hard mulliganing for Sea Giant and conch calling a Sea Giant as early as possible. Hakar the Soul Flare is essentially a hard counter to this deck. And
Okay,
it's not even that crazy of a win condition because of the fact that there's not that many 10 drops in the game. So if you get a Sea Giant down and you Conjurer's Calling it, there's a decent chance that you can get a Hakar. I don't know the exact numbers, but it does make the combo nearly impossible, at least a 100% guarantee for Saiyan. And the earlier you're shuffled in, the more bloods they're going to have in their deck, which means the weirder the timing's going to be because they're essentially never going to have an empty deck unless they can fill up their hand and discard the blood. So it is a very fringe case win condition, but if you're behind, that's what you have to go for. If you feel like they're drawing too aggressively, if you feel like you're not sticking a board, those are the types of things that you have to think about.
All right, so with that setup, maybe we should talk about some of the plays that's actually happening in this spot. No, I think you did a great job breaking it down.
It's not really like the Paladin is just drawing. That's pretty much all that happens in the early game.
Yeah, it's definitely a situation where Saiyan could evaluate whether or not he wanted to take the damage last turn. He decided to use his Pyromancer and Equality. I think mana efficiency is something that's really important to the Paladin.
Let me think.
When I played this deck, I actually ran into a lot of hand size issues because I wasn't really accounting for the mana expenditure very efficiently. I was being greedy at certain points, like, oh, I'll float 2 mana here and just hero power instead. In this case, Saiyan, he's at full life, practically speaking, and he won't die if he just lets these giants stay on the board, but he does have only 1 Pyromancer left, so if he goes for a Shrink Ray and he doesn't have his Consecration, then next turn is the turn that he has to clear. Wow, timeout in this position. He just wants to use it to gain life and to stop Purple from being able to pressure him.
Yeah, and I mean, this is kind of an awkward situation for Purple because he doesn't want to build too much else on the board because he knows that the removal is there. But at the same time, he wants to have pressure on the board to make sure that he can try and close out the game if Saiyan doesn't have removal. So it kind of puts him in an awkward spot. And I think that's one of the complexities of this Paladin deck is basically just managing your removal. It's not going too early in on your removal, but managing your life gain and your timeouts. That's probably the hardest part because I think most of the times you see this deck lose, it's because it's like 1 draw away or 2 draws away from being able to go for the combo, and it just can't get there because they didn't manage their removal correctly.
Yep. The one caveat to like all of this is that Saiyan is protecting his life total fairly aggressively, even at 30, which is definitely interesting to me. I think you have to also be very careful with your damage because 25 is obviously a lot of damage, but it's not their entire life totals. And sometimes I've seen ridiculous comebacks from the mage when I'm playing the Holy Wrath Paladin because I forget about the possibility of Ziliax to heal them out of the combo range. So Purple's at 24 right now, but one of the more important things to focus on as Saiyan's going to continue his game plan of drawing, staying alive, and assembling his combo is what is the mage health total actually at? And that's something that's on his mind. It might even be the point where Saiyan avoids hero powering or playing anything because he knows that possibility of Purple healing out of that range. I've gotten screwed because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And also Conjurer's Calling. Like, Conjurer's Calling a certain mana cost to help get mechs. Like, it's actually sometimes better to Conjurer's Calling the Sea Giant because you get a chance of getting Mech Cthulhu and then healing for 13, which was also a very rude awakening at one point. So I was like, wouldn't you Conjurer's Calling the Mountain Giant? It's like, no, actually the 10 count.
Yeah, or Hakar. Like it's
or Hakar, you're right. Yeah, like you were talking about in the beginning.
Yeah, it's very interesting dynamic, and also at the same time, you have to keep in mind the possibility of Archmageia Tinnitus, because it goes the same way for the mage. If they get a bunch of fireballs in hand with Archmageia Tinnitus, they can just not play minions. So then you never have a chance to attack in with Shirvala to get that health boost when you shuffle in, and they're going to die to fireballs. So aggressively keeping your life total high, I think is very valuable.
So Saiyan doesn't have card draw in his hand. Instead, he goes for a tempo play, and boy, was that a big swing on the board. 2 humilities in the deck as well for Saiyan, which is an acknowledgement directly to like a mountain giant that doesn't have the Conjurer's Calling. But in this position, ends up comboing very well with the Shrink Ray that was placed turns earlier. Purple looks like he's going for a big Mana Cyclone turn.
Job done.
Gonna refill his hand, hope for some direct damage, hope for some playmaking abilities in general, because right now his hand is just doing a bunch of hell. Pocket
Ooh.
Galaxy, Unexpected Results. 2 cards that will be getting buffed in the upcoming event, but not right now. Saiyan picks up Prismatic Lens. Potentially very good card. Also sometimes messes things up if you're not careful.
Yeah.
I've had situations where like I drew the Holy Wrath and the Shirvala, and Holy Wrath became 25 mana.
Yeah.
Even though Shirvala costs 0 in the deck, it takes its original mana cost.
Yeah. I was talking to Saiyan last night a little bit about the deck, just trying to learn as much as possible. It does pick Shirvala and Crystology, so not the biggest deal. But he said the one kind of fancy play that he'll make is just not playing Prismatic Lens if he feels like he's ahead, because he doesn't want to risk having an unplayable card. And even if it's a Crystology, like sometimes early on in the game, that can be pretty devastating because that's 2 additional cycle that you're missing out on because of the fact that you may have played a Prismatic Lens when you didn't need to.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it's only if you're very far ahead, because a lot of times you can take the risk. And I don't even know if he has that many minions left in his deck that he can draw with the Crystology. I think a Novice Engineer still remains, but only 6 cards left.
Only 6 cards left. A lot of them are just spells. For example, he hasn't drawn his Consecrations yet, which would be very convenient to stop a lot of Purple's pressure, because Purple seems like, at least in our eyes, it seems like the best thing he can do right now is build a small, wide board, clear off Saiyans, and start pressuring that way. Looking for the Unexpected Results potentially to be a big game changer here, because Conjurer's Calling does something similar, but obviously uses one of your best resources.
Yeah. Astral Rift could be interesting too, but you know, very unlikely. There's just a couple of very first case scenarios that would be useful. If you pick up a combo disruptor, like Unseen Saboteur and get a Holy Wrath, right?
Yeah, it looks like Purple just wants more spells as an opportunity to pressure. Maybe gets Fireballs, maybe gets Pyroblast. Yeah, I've seen all kinds of ranges. So Saiyan does not have any more card draw that isn't Holy Wrath, which is his second copy. He needs to hold on to it. Ziliax.
But he's got time. He's got timeout and he's got Shrink Ray, so effectively 2 more turns to buy with only 5 cards left in his deck. So,
oh, that's a stinger.
Yeah. Now, I don't think it was likely that he would get back up above 25 anyway.
You never know. I mean, the idea is that Saiyan can't clear Ziliax, so if Purple played it,
he would have to attack 3 times with it.
Right.
Which is the kind of the brutal part of that exchange.
Well, we have, it's kind of like you said, we have Astral Rift, we have other ways to potentially make it work, but no, you're totally right. And it's also like these small possibilities that Mage has to account for. Like, if you do play Conjurer's Calling, do you get a lifesteal minion? When you play Unexpected Results, do you get anything with spell damage? Instead, he actually gets a quite useless minion, Ancient Watcher. I mean, he doesn't have any weapon to ability attack to summon pirates, so
yeah,
not that great. Consecration draw, but there's 2 of them in the deck, and Saiyans at 5 cards remaining, so totally fine here. Purple's on a very tight clock here.
Yeah, I mean, really the only threat he has left remaining is Archmage Antonius. He might have another Mountain Giant too, but Archmage is the big one, and at this point I just don't think he has enough time to get to that point. And not only just get to that point, but also to be able to play Archmage Antonius, get the Fireballs, and then unleash enough to put Saiyan under pressure with timeout and only 3 cards left in deck.
Another Consecration here would just be mint for Saiyan. This is the only copy of Hammer of Wrath. A little bit less on the greedy side. Baleful Banker number 2 needs to hold on to that. And with the Shrink Ray here and the timeout next turn, should be able to get him directly to the guaranteed 25. Trades off into one of the minions, so that way if Purple plays a single spell, the Pyromancer ends up killing everything on the board, so Purple would have to Conjurer's Calling the Pyromancer. Everything looks good for Saiyan. Almost an inevitability here unless Purple can come up with something big. Another possibility is Counterspell, but both Mana Cyclones have been used already. Purple going for the miracle draws here. Finds Antonidas.
I'm almost out of cards.
Too late.
It's just a little bit too late for now. I mean, we're just wondering if there's any last possibility here. And so is Saiyan. I think he's... It's timeout that we were alluding to, but just hesitating to see if there's any other possibility.
Yeah.
There's actually no even real need to hero power here. You give your opportunity something to do ridiculous.
Aha!
Purple just hero powering his Antonidas here. It's largely inconsequential no matter what he does. But Saiyan testing for the counterspell, even coincidentally testing for Spellbender, sees that it's mirror entity. That's going to be 25. Game number 1 over to the Paladin. And this is what we were talking about. Mage is doing great so far, but we feel like in America's region, the win rate for Mage is going to be very low because a lot of players were expecting it, and Saiyan gets his first win in the Hearthstone Grandmasters system.
Yeah, and that's kind of Purple just not really expecting Holy Wrath Paladin to be much of a force in this week number 2. Not really a great primary deck to handle it. And while he does have a secondary deck that he can switch to that may be okay, it cuts Frost Novas and Snap Freeze. It also cuts Sea Giant, and it adds weapon removal, and it adds Twilight Drakes and Astromancer. So while he does have the potential to get on board earlier and has more of those mid-sized threats to kind of get to those mid-game and before start removal, just saying, looks like he's on a tear.
All right, well, that's game number 1 in the books. Purple can switch to his secondary or tertiary decks. We'll find out what ends up happening. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hearthstone Masters. Today, we're going to share one of the biggest changes coming to Hearthstone in 2019, an entirely new competitive format called Specialist. Specialist will be the default competitive format for Hearthstone Masters. From online Masters qualifiers to live Masters Tour events to the pinnacle of competition, Hearthstone Grandmasters. Ready to learn how the new Specialist format works? Let's dive right in. In this new competitive format, players select 3 30-card decks to bring to a Specialist tournament. The catch? All decks must be from the same class. In this regard, Specialist is a major departure from most other competitive formats. Amongst every player's 3 Specialist decks, one is designated as the primary deck. The player's other 2 decks are designated as secondary and tertiary decks. There are no special limitations placed on a player's primary deck aside from regular Hearthstone deck construction rules. However, a player's secondary and tertiary decks must share at least 25 cards in common with their primary deck. In other words, secondary and tertiary decks must mirror the primary deck with up to 5 cards swapped out. It is important to point out that duplicate cards count when comparing to a primary deck. For example, if you want to include 2 copies of Twilight Drake in your secondary deck, and there are no copies of Twilight Drake in your primary deck, then you must spend 2 swaps to include both cards. Unique or not, if a card isn't in your primary deck, it counts towards the 5-card difference limit. A player's primary deck is important for another reason. Whenever a new match starts, both its players must begin by piloting their primary deck. Only after the first game concludes can you choose to swap into your secondary or tertiary deck. You do not announce which of your decks you will be using in the next game, and you do not have to swap. After every game, this process repeats, allowing players to swap or stay until the match concludes. Importantly, you can swap to any of your decks between games, primary, secondary, or tertiary, including returning to your primary deck if you have previously swapped out of it. And those are all the rules for Specialist, Hearthstone's new official competitive format. So what are you waiting for? Get out there and start brewing your own primary, secondary, and tertiary decks to get a jump start on the new format and innovate like the pros.
Let the battle begin!
Welcome back, everyone, to week 2 of the Hearthstone Grandmasters for America. Saiyan has his first win under his belt, and he can continue that momentum with a potential Game 2 victory. Purple has to switch to either his secondary or tertiary deck, but also could choose his primary deck to stay. And if I'm taking a look at it, it look like he's chosen his secondary deck here,
Right.
adding in a Twilight Drake, an acidic Swamp Ooze, which is not actually that useful because Saiyan doesn't have the True Silver Champion in his deck.
Yeah, this is what I was kind of talking about with not that well prepared. This deck seems like it's kind of targeted at the Warriors, should there be any. He did take out Frost Nova and Snap Freeze, which are essentially dead cards in the matchup, outside of a very specific scenario that we saw in the last game, where Saiyan tries to tempo him out, but that's not the win condition whatsoever.
Right.
But Astromancer and Twilight Drake will help a little bit, just to try and get something on the board in those turns that Purple just had that were kind of dead in the last game, where he was just trying to fill his hand up with Mana Cyclones and putting bananas on his mirror images to try and push a little bit more damage. So should be a little bit closer.
When it comes to opponent that's just playing 1/1s, if you play Acidic Swamp Ooze, that's just way better than a Snap Freeze.
Absolutely.
Or even just a Harrison Jones as a 5-mana 5/4. That's better than a Frost Nova.
Sure.
Yeah, it's like I'll take any or all of that. However, looking at Purple's opening hand, he's on the coin. He has the Mountain Giants. He doesn't have, one of the more interesting things is the departure from Book of Specters because of how big that they are on Mana Cyclones. So that's why a lot of times this deck, people say that you don't really have to expect anything for the first 5 turns, and you're really capitalizing on the fact that they're gathering up for a big tempo swing, and that plays directly into the Paladin's hands.
Yep, and saying early game plan, sure.
Whew.
Draw some cards.
Crystology's so good, and it's going to get even better.
1 mana, Dan. Hearthstone will never be the same again.
I mean, it's Crystology. I was talking to Kibler and Armstead. It's like Crystology was already like one of, if not Paladin's, just best card from the most recent expansions of the past year, and it just got buffed to be twice as effective, which is ridiculous if you really think about it. People look at some of the more heavy hitting legendaries in the past as we come up on this turn. Purple looks like he has this Mountain Giant set up this turn. Some of the most insane discounts like Preparation and Innervate were always the measuring stick for things like Emperor Thaurissan, right? Like Emperor Thaurissan is like, wow, you get like 5 Innervates in your hand. And the reason why it was super effective was because of the discount on cheap stuff.
Yep.
When you discount something from 10 to 9 mana, it's a 10% increase. When you decrease something from 2 to 1, that's doubling its effectiveness, right, in terms of its mana discount. And sometimes, of course, going from 1 to 0 is just insanely powerful. So I anticipate Crystology to be nuts, if not just flat out broken, TJ.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Holy Wrath Paladin is really the only deck that uses it right now, but I can see it being incredibly powerful in the future. And honestly, one thing I want to talk about is Holy Wrath Paladin probably isn't going to be a deck that you can keep bringing week to week.
Yep.
As soon as people expect it, there are a lot of hard counters to it. Basically, any neutral card that can heal you above that 25 health, Unseen Saboteur later in the game, pretty much regardless what it pulls out is going to be a big deal. There's just a lot of ways you can account for it with a secondary and tertiary deck. So very bold call bringing it, something that we can't kind of understate for the 3 players that did so this week.
All right, so a little bit of interesting play patterns are already here from Saiyan. He didn't choose to answer the first Mountain Giant. Instead, he chose to Holy Wrath for card draw and staying on curve. And I think, again, this is credence to, 1, understanding that you can play with your life total. 2, he has Crystal Smith Kangor, so he can restore a little bit of its health already back onto the board. And then, 3, he already has better removal tools lined up with Equality and the Shrink Ray and 2 timeouts. So even in pinch scenarios, he should be fine. Like in this spot here, you can actually just go for a Pyromancer clear with Equality. He goes for a timeout. He's even greedier. So this is interesting because last time he went against 1 Mountain Giant and 1 Conjurer's Calling, and then he used the Pyromancer Equality. And I thought that was more for mana efficiency. What's with the timeout here, TJ, you think?
So this is, like I said, one of the harder things to recognize is when to go in on removal. I think Saiyan's realizing very quickly that there's a good chance that Purple has gone with his secondary deck here, and that means he's going to have more waves of removal, and this timeout here just buys him a ton of time. Reason being is because he can always just load up with the removal next turn, and timeout later in the game. While it can buy you time, it also can kind of force Purple or just saying to force Purple's hand and make him play more stuff to try and have more pressure on board. Saiyan knows that his deck has so many ways to deal with these big boards. There's one picked up, and if he humilities one of these Mountain Giants, then he does have a chance to even buy more time. I imagine we're going to see the trigger pulled on removal here, but he does have that option. And also, we talked about in the last game, preserving your life total and keeping it high is honestly a very big thing because of the possibility of Archmage Antonidas.
Right.
Now the second one, I guess all of the same logic applies to the second one, but the second one is where
it's just getting more debatable.
Yeah, I'm scratching my head a little bit.
I mean, I totally understand Saiyan's rational logic. Like, it's not even Antonidas. It's just more like if they get you within that like 12 to 15 range. We've seen Mana Cyclone end the game too, with just getting direct burn. I mean, Purple picked up a pair of Frostbolts last game, even with just like 3 or 4 cards of Mana Cyclone. Wow, a 2-card Mana Cyclone. Freeing up his hand because he does want to draw the Antonidas in case. But now this is absolutely grounds for Saiyan to clear Equality Consecration. The original iconic duo, not quite as fast as it was past days, but still very effective. And Saiyan still also has the Shrink Ray Consecration.
My calculations are flawless.
Oh, that's a big boy.
Hello.
That's exactly what Purple is looking for. I think that's actually just the straight up best outcome possible.
Yeah, I mean, just Saiyan's early game plan to try and protect his life total now just kind of in the dumpster, and Purple has double Conjurer's Calling still in hand. Well, triple, honestly.
Right, but he lost both of his Mountain Giants, I believe.
He did use both Mountain Giants, so he has Astromancer and he has a Sea Giant. Oh no, he cut his Sea Giant.
Cut his one
Astromancer and Twilight Drake as his threats left. And maybe that's where Saiyan's mind was with the double timeout. He saw the expenditure of both Mountain Giants. He realized that there's only a limited amount of threats that Purple could have.
It's true.
So if he preserves his life total, that gets rid of the outs of burn damage from hand.
Yeah, I like that. Wow, this turn's going to be absolutely insane for Purple because he's going to have Mana Cyclone. And now he might be able to pick up even more damage. His counter spell is also very annoying for Saiyan because he has to account for all the possibilities. Okay, Conjurer's Calling. I mean, the Arcane Intellect's okay. Polymorph might actually be better than you might think it is. Oh, hey, Mana Worm.
Yeah,
Not
Mana
bad
Worm is
either.
actually sick.
Yeah, Mana Worm's really good.
Especially considering just saying, well, I guess he has Blood Mage Thalnos plus Consecration, but he's got to make the decision here. Do I Humility?
Yes, very smart. Testing the counterspell and the Spellbender just in case. Not that Spellbender would affect too much, but this AoE was very nice for Saiyan. Twilight Drake.
I mean, it's something to do, right? Like that, he's just running low on threats, and I honestly think he might even... Oh, okay. Saiyan
Second
Binder.
Mana Cyclone.
Well, I was thinking he might Arcane Intellect here to try and find the second Astromancer.
I like this too. Blast Blade to get more spells to potentially damage your opponent.
Yeah.
Because, like, again, if he has a Pyroblast, he's a lot closer than he thinks. So I was kind of mentioning the polymorph. I don't know if I finished that thought, but it's like the idea is that Saiyan does always have these weird pinch scenarios where he can use like the Servala to heal, and then you can use polymorph to stop the second form of healing, right? If you don't have the removal spell. So Saiyan picks up Servala, does have Baleful Banker, doesn't need to pull a trigger on it just yet. He's fairly close. He's 3 cards away.
And he's got a few turns to buy, right? Because he has Wild Pyromancer plus Shrink Ray.
Been hanging out with your son a little bit too much, TJ.
Shrink Ray.
Oh, your baby.
He can't even talk yet, man. No,
That's what you think.
I talk to him like an adult. He pays rent.
Wow, TJ's a strict landlord here.
That's right.
Where does he pay his rent in? That's what I want to know. Is it dirty diapers?
Yeah. It's poop, Dan.
Oh, God. Conjurer's Calling on the 4-mana minions to improve the power of the board. Goes from 4 to 9. That's definitely a start. I think Saiyan would like to clear this board, would like to stay alive for 2 more turns. He does have like the soft guarantee of surviving because he can Shirvala and Baleful Banker and go for it again.
Yep. He also has the emergency out of Shirvala double Baleful Banker and then Holy Wrath for the 2 and 3.
I've seen those before.
Yeah. It's a last-ditch effort because that's everything, right? Unless your Shirvala sticks and you can attack multiple times, which is very unlikely.
Well, sometimes they have double Holy Wrath, so what they do is they go for Shirvala, double shuffle, and then Holy Wrath twice in a row when they have like 4 or 5 cards remaining.
Yeah. Oftentimes.
Wow. Sorry, just knife juggler with the that works out really.
I mean, it's direct damage. I mean, it's a weird way to get direct damage.
Yeah.
Oh, Spellzerker is very interesting.
Yes.
If
but
you
he doesn't
pick,
have any damage spells.
Yeah, and he doesn't have a way to generate any damage spells. That's the problem.
Ziliax. So Shirvala and Ziliax and Baleful Banker, all the lifesteal that you could ask for. I mean, Saiyan practically goes up to full life.
It's time to test your metal.
And Purple doesn't have the opportunity to capitalize on his Ziliax either because of all the damage. You know, I really like the way Saiyan has played this because the way he's like squeezed in points of damage on Purple just means that he has less outs and he's forced to even go more all in on the spell plan.
Yeah.
And Purple looks like he's just stranded. Like, Khadgar's cool, but he has no way to capitalize onto it. He has the double Ray of Frost and the Polymorph to stop any further healing from the Paladin. But, you know, that's 6 mana investment already. That's not even a winning play. He might have to go for something bigger with Frost Nova maybe to freeze and then go for something else. It's very difficult from Purple spot.
Yeah, but regardless of all of that, I mean, Saiyan has just a 50-50 chance to win just next turn, right? Because if he doesn't draw Shirvala, that's the only card left in his deck, and he can Holy Wrath. Maybe he can try and bait an attack, because if he sets up Ice Barrier and Saiyan attacks into it with one of his minions, with a 1/1, even then, though, he would deal the 1 damage, so he'd be exactly 25. So his best chance is to try and bluff the counterspell again, but just Saiyan has humility again, and draws the Shirvala, so...
That's, I mean, Saiyan's going to test Splitting Image here with the attacks. He said it's not. He might test the...
I don't think you test counterspells.
Yeah, you don't need to test it until you're going for the winning move.
Yeah, because what if he has 2 counterspells? They're still randomly generated spells in here.
Exactly.
So just smart play overall.
Oh, Fatigue. Antonidas plus Ray of Frost. Great combination, but Purple knows that he's dead anyways if he goes for it. Tries to get a little bit deeper. We know that Purple doesn't have the second Mana Cyclone because he did play the Sandbinder.
Yeah.
Finds nothing. And I think Purple finds his Ziliax to no avail. No mech, no ability to heal out of it. And obviously, Saiyan's not silly enough to play into the Ice Barrier anyways. I think Purple's hoping for some kind of miracle mistake here from Saiyan, but I don't think Saiyan's going to fall for it.
Yeah. Has the humility to test for counterspell, that's all he needs. And Purple throws out the well played, a much different story than last week for both of these players. Saiyan 2-0.
Yep, and I think this is just going to be the beginning of the domination of Mage. I know everyone and their grandmother are writing about how powerful Mage will be and how it's just going to be extremely oppressive, but Holy Wrath Paladin absolutely crushes the Mage from my perspective.
Yep.
And I think this is going to be a theme of today, TJ. Saiyan cruises to a fast 2-0 victory.
Yeah, and I mean, I said it. I don't know if Holy Wrath Paladin's a deck that has the longevity week to week that we've seen from Mage, but I just love kind of the quote-unquote risk that these players have taken. Warrior destroys the primary deck, but they have answers for that with the Immortal Prelate Undertaker kind of infinite combo of death rattles to be able to shuffle back into your deck.
Right.
very great bring.
It was one of the decks that I believe Meaty was predicting to do well. Meaty is a player that's been on my radar a lot because he is crushing it on ladder. He's crushing the Battle Rift League. He might be one of the top grinder players, despite also being a full-time doctor, by the way. He like goes out and saves lives and then crushes those very saved lives on ladder within the next evening or two. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit more about that because we're joined right now by justsaiyan for talk about his victory. So Saiyan, can you hear us? Are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. What's up?
Awesome, man. First wins in Grandmasters, easy 2-0 victory. Talk to me about how you're feeling about it right now.
It feels good because at least for the past 2 weeks, I've been trying something different. Like last week was all Warrior Mirrors, and I didn't want to bring the same like greedy stuff and just go 50-50, so I tried Azalina. This week, everyone's going to bring Mage, so I tried to go Paladin. Just try to do something different, you know, just something that isn't quite the norm, I guess, at the moment.
Do you feel Paladin's very favored against Mage?
Well, since everyone was teching for Mage in their primary, like Purple had 2 snap freezes, Purple had the Antonitis, which is like pretty slow versus me, and I can always just use timeouts later. His deck just has, especially like secondary and tertiary, like he can be a little greedier with Astromancers against Warrior, but that's still a 7-mana minion, still really slow. If he doesn't get like an early giant start, I feel very favored versus the Mage.
And even despite having that early giant, seeing those 2 timeouts played pretty aggressively was really cool and eye-opening for me because when I played this deck, I felt like I was teetering a lot on that life total where I was still kind of scared. And that makes so much sense to play the timeouts early because everyone's used to conditioning playing it like the next turn to guarantee a win. Is that some of the logic that was going into your plays when you were playing those fast timeouts?
It kind of depends. Like first game, I cleared as much as I could. Second game, I just didn't have anything in hand, so I had to wait, right? Like I didn't have the card draw. And Purple's a smart guy. He's not going to commit more than 2 9/9s. Like it's more than enough already. So I just have to go tick for tack and hope I hit the card draw later. Which I mean, the deck has so much card draw. Once you can brick for a while, but you're not going to brick forever. You're going to find it eventually. So.
All right, nice summary there. TJ saying that he feels like Paladin is a deck that might not be able to be played week to week. However, I look at your deck list and it seems like you do have a lot of versatility. Like you have the Undertaker with the Immortal Prelate package if you ran to really slow decks like Warrior, and you even have better anti-aggro tech. It seems to me that the Holy Wrath Paladin is a lot more flexible than maybe we give it credit for. So I personally think that it is a deck that we might be seeing in the weeks to come. Obviously, I know that you still have to prepare for your other matches in the weekend, and there's more weeks to play. But what do you think about that little discussion that we have going on there?
Everyone is playing Spell Mage, but me, I'm just playing Freeze Mage with this Holy Wrath Paladin. And Freeze Mage is pretty good, so
definitely.
Not too bad.
All right, cool. All right, Sam, congratulations on your first victory. You mentioned that you're anticipating all the mages. Well, you're playing another Paladin later this weekend. So
yeah, I didn't see that coming. That came out of the blue. Oh
it's going to be kind of a degenerate, but we'll go ahead and wish you luck there. Congrats on your victory, man.
Thank you, guys.
All right, so as we alluded to before the top of the show, we had 3 Paladin players, but Saiyan gets to win very easily over the Mage. He's going to be playing against Rase later this weekend, who also brought a Paladin, which the matchup gets pretty clowny.
I'm gonna call it here first, Dan. If people expect Holy Wrath Paladin to be next week, we're going to be seeing a lot of Hakar the Soul Flayers in secondary and tertiary decks.
I hope so. That'd be super
That's
cool.
the dank tech right
That's
there.
super dank, because then you don't want to draw too much. Then maybe like
but then you don't get your combo.
Then you don't win.
Yeah.
So you have to like budget your life totals, and maybe you time out and then you draw. Yep. It's going to be really cool if that ends up coming down to that exact matchup later this weekend. So that's our first match. Saiyan takes down Purple. Coming up next, we got Monsanto versus Rase, the other Paladin in day number 1. We'll find out what ends up happening when we return to the America's Hearthstone Grandmasters.